So I've got a time to kind of live out the rest of my day at home, and that day is in thoughts and words, so I'm going to go into it. A couple things have occurred to me. Most recently that, recently being like from moment to moment, my thoughts are changing. So my emotions are stirred up. So this is a brief um, little introduction among all the videos I've done today. I'm doing a good walk and getting home. Buddy's good, and I've taken command of the house for about 4 hours. As you set the watch, roughly 4 hours. So, let's see, 4 hours of my house to myself until maybe 5 o'clock, probably earlier. Itself is like almost unheard of in my life. So, my father, and I speak carefully where I say this, but my father, and I talk about the Father and in the sky, connecting with my Father, and everything I say about Satanism, I can connect to choices and ways that I've tried to advance my relationship with my Father, and someone who more than any other man was completely all the Father that I needed. This is something that I think resonates very strongly with me. My father, and many fathers perhaps, grew up in a way where I think he kind of spoke a fluent language of guilt. And anything that happened to you as a child is something you can be guilty for, or something you might need to make someone else guilty for. And as a sociopath, or in his capacity as even just hardworking people can behave like a sociopath. And as much as my sister carries on this tradition, like anything as you sit in your home in your life and you're critically associated with this person, ostensibly in some sense you depend upon them for survival, as much as they're at least not going to hurt you. Whether or not they help your survival, they're not going to. And everyone's here, whether you like it or not, is probably survival based. And this can seem right, or it can seem wrong, and it can seem like an agenda. And my dad certainly erred, and my sister certainly errs, in as much as you know these types of people and the way they talk, that anything you feel guilty about yourself, or could, if it's just a gray area of harm you sustain, or that they speak as though you're guilty of your own feelings about it. Or you don't give enough to mom, and you don't do enough for the family, or you're not really all that useful to people around you. And the sociopath can make you feel that way. It sounds like a very economic punishment, doesn't it? You're not useful in it. And I connect these illnesses to families and to what we can call aberrations created by our interaction with the economic systems of the world. And I put a number on that, like 1,000 years, which I think is important number to resonate at a numerical level with really the number of years that might need to be under consideration in terms of all human behavior and outcomes. And I've given that number based on certain beliefs of mine about the very fabric of the so-called chronology of history, as much as it goes back to some pretty metaphysical concepts and how we use the number 0 and in the birth of Christ and AD and BC and AM and PM. And you would find, I expect, as an amateur philologist, and I guess you could say occultist, but looking into dark things, not so much because I find I'm looking for the power of Satan, so much as I'm looking and seeing dark things and finding that there is a resonance of power, and it could be ill or not, that is shaking deep chords of your mind at the level of your flesh and blood, at the level of your birth, and at the level of your power, at the level of your mother's power, your mother's body, as it sustained bad uses of power, and mothers and mothers and mothers throughout 1,000 years. Things that may have touched your father's voice or your people's health, or behaved like a parasite and the voices of your own mother and father while they were sustaining things they couldn't say. You had to sustain things which you couldn't say, that would cast negative aspersions upon their behavior, like a psychotic, which brings up the first point I thought about today. So to just summarize, anything, if someone's behaving in any narcissistic state, or goes in and out of those mental states, or a lot of their relationship with other people basically amount to ways that you might feel that they're being very sociopathic or narcissistic or predatory to you. no matter how many illnesses you seem to be able to connect or ill fortunes to how these people seem to behave toward you, you would never be able to prove it. It's like the unknown illness. You'd rather, before you've sustained broken legs and this, or had to go to court, or headaches, or stomach aches, or some sort of chronic health condition, and before, maybe you get away from these people and all of a sudden all these conditions disappear. But it's not because you're, for some reason, pulled into these people's lives and you do something for them, but essentially they make you feel like you're doing nothing for them. And you're never getting a feeling that you're looking for as a human, except like someone playing at a losing game, where you become addicted to the chemicals of losing at poker in a casino. And you just keep playing your losing game. In this way that victims of domestic abuse, we wonder why they keep being abused. And what if, says the victim, one day my mother will stop abusing me and I'll learn something along the way. And how ill-advised you might be to do that, which is what I've tried to do. And another question that comes up, and so to summarize again, my father and my sister and other members of the family can really get into a state of mind where everything you even feel unsure about yourself, they know how to push your buttons and guilt you and use emotional blackmail. Anything that you feel you need to say about how you feel is something that you're doing to them and their children. You're depriving this, that. You're just using all types of relationships to accuse you of things and make you feel guilty. You're the one who should feel guilty. And you might even just do your best to just stay away from these people and never see them or talk to them, because who knows what about you has made them need to behave this way. At the very least, let me go and be guilty and try to console my wounds for this obviously very bad behavior of mine that's made me go to the hospital 20 times for dislocated shoulders and all of my ribs. I must be very sick. That seems to happen all by itself. And I certainly don't think it has anything to do with the people who seem to have done it to me, because I really just should feel guilty about, having bones that can be dislocated. I mean, I'm sorry about that. I guess it must have been a problem at the manufacturer. So you see how very literally and explicitly and quite biblically victims of their own families and the behavior of people around them can become their own fault. Inasmuch as humans barely begin this life, but that they're faulted for any number of things in different forms of languages that are all fairly predatory to what language we might have formed upon our lips if we didn't live in this such and such a world. Even if you don't think that that is useful, it is literally a theoretically true thing that you could explore for any reason, whether you love the world or hated the world or whatever you wanted to use that instrument for, you could use it. Just a way to think. And if it's dangerous, it's dangerous. Okay, let's talk about what's dangerous about that. Why is that dangerous to someone's sanity or someone's time? What has made that dangerous? But we jump out of planes and we make our muscles and our tits and our asses and we get them surgically altered to look a certain way. Isn't this just something you can elect to do that will help things to look or make you look in a different way? Maybe if you started thinking that, your friends would think you're an ugly, awful human being. So you don't. Why can't you? Why can't you think about those things? It would seem quite rational to anything that could help us see something that we might not see, because things that happen in groups that are bad are often things, whether we like it or not, that we haven't seen. Things could happen to us. We could be sexually assaulted our whole lives and never even know it. And so we go, hey, by the way, do you feel, you take a questionnaire one day for Vogue magazine, have you ever had relationships where you have occasion not to feel safe because it's as though someone else's survival-based reality is your own personal safety in some sense? And their reality has to dominate your reality, no matter how much it costs, and you have no say in the matter. And don't be surprised if that, in some sense, is part of your entire life. Get away to think about the world. How much of your life did you get to really define? If, lawyers and clerks and political people and great authors and cultural leaders are essentially defining the reality of millions of people. Yes, not even facts that become almost like gender fashions for how much your body, your mind, your sexuality can be like a costume you can wear to the best effect under whatever conditions. Whether or not we sustained any interest or to enumerate what those conditions were that subtended what amounted to the costumes of our, that our minds could not even be discriminated from costumes you would wear on a stage of the damned. where various languages and motifs tend to dominate, and people who are all in the darkness tend to be captivated and, in a sense, murdered, slaughtered, or slain, commensurate with the ways that all people learn to lie, and so all of the unnecessary violence that is inevitable when people are lying in such and such, if theatrical, useful, economic, industrial, or survival-based way, because your survival becomes based in speaking in the ways that have most threatened your survival. Not that you have to sustain the ability or the will toward it, unless, of course, someone somewhere has approved of you mounting this or that attack upon the system that was in advance of the system that is yet to be, and yet never produced in the same thing, because it's like aspartame. It's meant to take 1,000 different names. Its fundamental effect and persuasive power upon the brains of our families. Because the people that made it aren't stupid, and they've, we've basically given them 1,000 years to do whatever with our minds, including sending millions of people to die in war. A lot of them are fathers, and millions more that are still alive saying, the war was the best time of our lives, and you know what? It never took anything away from us that we weren't willing to give. Yay! The Germans are just destructive people. And then 99% of people that were born in the early 21st century or early 20th century that were 1 and 2, if they were still alive, they defend it to the death. Defend it to the death. It did happen. We had to do this. This is what it was. It was great. There was no cost that was too difficult to bear. A person would say that any family in the world would benefit from any school of thought coming together to discuss with the most clinical and objectivity you possibly could, all bias in the world, the causes and effects of industrial scale warfare, taking into account, yes, all of the usual bullshit about why it had to happen and how it was an amazing time of human existence, because it was just such a necessary step in our evolution. And that's exactly what the kind of bullshit is going to be pounded into in the stakes and the coffins of the future, become of your grandchildren's fucking minds. Can you imagine what they're going to say about World War II in 100 fucking years? That has approved the fucking gene pool of the human race. We had another one. Or really, did it ever stop? And exactly when do you know that it started? Blackadder is a BBC comedy who said something within days. I watched after I'd had the same thought, who knows how many times while walking 15,000 miles on this earth. At what point, if you're interested in language and law and time and history and the truth and all kinds of complicated dynamics, does the earth go from the ante-meridian to the post-meridian? The beginning of the Common Era to after or during the Common Era? The beginning of 9/11 and the end of 9/11? When did we go from non-war to war? In as much as that's related to when it is declared. And when did we go from war to back to non-war? Do you know where that fucking is? But we know where fucking subatomic particles are in a soup of trillions of parsecs. Go fuck yourself. Go, and all of your fucking teachers, go fuck yourself back to the beginning of creation and whatever fucking asshole shart you came out of. Because that's all your theories amount to. And it doesn't seem like the way people should talk. It seems that we should have more intelligence, more depth, more nuance to our minds. And not because you have to be so paranoid, but where the fuck does any war end? When? We still have daylight savings time, for the fuck's sake. That's practically a psychological warfare that started around World War I and II for some fucked up reason, right? Because you do anything in a time of war to maximize everything that everyone is supposed to maximize for everyone. Maximum for everyone by killing tens of millions of people. Maximize for everyone. Maximize, maximize, maximize. And what are you maximizing? Your slaughter. Your slaughter. Why? So you can have so many fucking chits in your bank account? So you have such a commanding knowledge of the beginning of the universe at the end of a fucking computer on the internet? It might as well be a node in a brain that's suffering from some perpetual fucking seizure. Really, if you want to think about the intellectual coherence of the internet. right? And not so much that any video or mind is so stupid or media is so powerful, but how much is really going on in the mind of the average human being that isn't about making more chits or protecting your chits or advancing some incredible religion or metaphysical or spiritual wonderment of the human yogic purpose and destiny in life. That's basically what the chit making people have fucking set aside for you. So you're never too far from your making chit activities, like a soldier on liberty who finds an ample enjoyment and recreation in banging hookers and doing blow and getting some action on the side of the local mafia or whatever the fuck they do. Because your life is permanently out of order. You lower your inhibitions to do everything, from your recreation to your work. No sooner are people working more and more interesting and yet perverse and bureaucratic and deadly and morbid and wonderful ways, then they're also jumping out of planes and bungee jumping and getting more involved in deeper political and sexual cults in the world. So that everything from their work to their recreation is a fucking job, but none of it has to make sense to reality. And you look at how many people ever wield their reality over you or somebody else. If only at different times or when they're drinking. Think of what someone can do when they're drinking and they're drunk. They're wielding their reality over you, right? How many ways do humans get used to someone wielding their reality over them? And all of reality is survival based. I gotta draw a bath. I tell my mom, in as much as I'm disposed to have anything to say at all for my own safety in my world, and my sister's behavior complicates with my mother's behavior, and I guess whatever you would say, my behavior or position in life, even economically, how it might affect my mother's or sister's behavior, which has never been a terribly powerful position, to be sure, if you want me to be perfectly honest, which of course opens me up to all kinds of criticism, and that my occupations serve, if at all, I might need to defend, to be of any useful, other than producing some money for my house, of any use to my family. But the things that are most use to my family are connected to me about what's been most abusive in and around my family, and that I've learned to say the names of the abuses I've suffered and they have suffered in any useful way, even if it's just a provisional way. It's like, oh, when I was in my 40s and 50s, I sort of treated this as kind of psychopathy and schizophrenia and industrial poisoning, and I was living and trying to live out from and away from all kinds of what I learned to call domestic abuse, because I had no one to talk to, and I certainly didn't trust the perverts who call themselves counselors. You say, whoa, dude, like, right? Why would I call counselors perverts? Why can't we live in a world where we start calling them what they are? And every fucking life coach, every fucking on YouTube is trying to solve your fucking problems, right? To guide you in the narrow way of making money or being a spiritual person or becoming a life coach yourself that can tell people how to feel their feelings. And their brains, I come home from the forest, right? And my brain is operating a certain way, right? And I'm gonna do something here. I'll turn out the lights. My mom's in here. Testify to certain fears. And I'm gonna get some shit together for the bath. Drink some water and get myself ready to go. To get into my little healing world. And say, there's fear. Less this and that. Okay, 6. Okay, good. I'm gonna quickly just fry up some eggs. Through the toaster. I'm just gonna do the eggs. Out. my body reminds me of something. If my body could talk and I could talk for my body reminds me, even as we speak, that I have sustained extraordinary injuries, full stop. That you sort of would need some counseling, I think, to deal with. I got 2 more eggs, that's good. Kind of like a poor person, I've got 2 eggs, I don't want to eat because the last 2, and then I can have another meal out of them, essentially. And now I'm doing multitasking here because, let's see, salt, put some clothes in, I'm just going to put 1 in. And, okay. Something here, that's my drink. There's that. I didn't eat pizza today. I just realized I forgot I had pizza. So I'll enjoy that in a second. Whisk these up. Repeat them up. Stir them up. Such a strange day that I don't want. I mean, days can be good, maybe it'll be good, but I don't want it. I don't want this day. I didn't want this day to happen. I mean, it has to happen. I didn't want to stop it, but it's like my mom, my sister, everything about their lives to me. I don't know how else to put it. It's not my fault. It's not my problem, but it's like, or it shouldn't be. It's called their highly volatile relationship as it comes to bear upon me, more or less. And it's not that it shouldn't, it's not that it couldn't, but the way that it does. And it's not a good story. It hasn't been a nice experience for me. Your family and stuff, like, you kind of have to give up thinking that they're ever going to care, about that it's not been a very good experience for you, because it's been a good experience for them. So, we're bound to get defensive. Right? What's in it for them? I just put 3 seconds of cold water, which I don't normally do. I'm just getting to the time of year where I can kind of take it easy on myself. Once I've had my baths, I'll settle down a bit because there's my good timing. And I'm scared. I've got some time on myself and the circumstances are honest. My sister starts saying that she's nervous. I start nervous. Like, my mother and sister's relationship has had way too much to do with me over the last. I mean, that's just one of many artifacts of the abuse of my family to my family, but then to me. Just like it's scarcely possible to really distinguish one subject of abuse from another if you're trying to distinguish it in a way that's not going to create more harm than good. And so for very complicated and rational people don't talk about abuse in their family. It's dangerous. Just got to brush my hair before I get in. I've learned to be cautious as to my mom's state of mind. My mom doesn't fully realize it, but she can get into mood. She raises her voice. That's not a good sign, in life, in psychology. Someone in a house or a woman raises their voice to a man. That's not the kind of situation that you want. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Oh fuck. Yeah, that's hot. Oh, fuck, that's the way it should be. Okay. Oh, okay. We'll just wait it out. No rush. um, you know your fear, your anxiety. If you're being abused, you can bet the abuser um, has had um, your anxiety arouses their anxiety, and so anxieties subtend or are commensurate with there isn't enough love to go around. You know, oh, I thought I heard something. What an awful feeling. Oh, just a man's voice. Paranoid. Paranoid. But in movies, people hear things and then it goes away, and then like, did I hear something? And then they get axe murdered. And today I didn't feel any particular threats, but I did feel a panic attack. I'm on, and I found a nice place, and I was thinking, okay, tomorrow will be a better day. Good knowledge, but what is this knowledge about? What is it subtending? Domestic violence. What are we talking about? Like, I'm talking as someone who could barely escape living in it for most of his adult life, and for whatever reason, has learned a lot of things that might be useful in the subject, but also critically, time and time again, that knowing things and thinking things and trying to figure out what's wrong and going through things, and no matter what you do, nothing stopping. What you might rightly sense is different complicated human dynamics that end up being dangerous for you. How many abused man, woman, boy, or girl who simply wasn't a place in the world, in human economics and history, where complex relationships didn't add up so well for them? And you can fill in the blanks all you want, but that was their destiny. And maybe, we've unfortunately, maybe not without any reprieve or any mercy or any way to turn back, as human beings, we've made that happen way too much. And it's been a part of a lot of unnatural and unnecessarily human suffering and death. And all humans had to kind of maybe think about that without anyone telling someone how they should think about it, what they owe the world. So at the very least, I should not prey on your time. I should not oblige anyone in talking about these things or talking around these things, or just allowing myself to sound off about things that have scared me and scare the people who scare me, essentially. Or might. And then I could just start imagining the things that scare people that they know not, because they seem to do violent things to me or other people for reasons they don't seem to need to even make to themselves, because they never become adequately evinced that they've done anything wrong. And the more you try to say anything, how many different ways can you put it, and how dangerous it is to talk to someone like your family member who's hurt you so severely that you have to spend a lot of your life struggling to tell them in a way that they're not going to make them hit you again, or hate you even more. And all of a sudden, this person says, "Everything's fine. Don't worry. I love you." All of a sudden, "Shut up! I hate it when you talk that way." And how many people, even as adults or elderly, or members of organizations, are told, "Shut up! I don't like you when you talk that way." Let's just honor that for a second as I get heated by this super bath. And live in danger of one person wielding their reality over me because they need to for their own survival, or because of a surrogate like my mother for her survival, the protection of another person. sociopaths can err on the side of doing things and involving their prey in doing things to protect them or people around their prey, to protect them from the prey. And so people project their survival and their interest in the survival on others out and use all their professional or survival capacities to convince someone close to you that you're a negative person and you're a danger to their life. When in fact, the person doing all this convincing is the real danger. Wow. Have you ever had that happen around you? I've learned to take a break from the camera. Here I go. Okay, I'm back. We're almost done draining. I feel good about this bath. 333, it's a good sign on the camera. Oh, release unnecessary fears. It's almost